If you're new with us this morning, thank you so much for coming out and being part of the weekend with us. We're so glad you're here. And one of the things that you've walked into, and I want you to be aware of this, is that throughout 2023, what we are doing is we are walking through the entire book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible. And in the Bible, there's not another book that is more misrepresented or misunderstood, and often just completely ignored because it's a little bit scary. We don't know what to do with it, so we ignore it completely. So what we're doing is we're spending 43 Sundays this year going through this book, and you guys are coming near the end of the first quarter of our deep dive into this book. And what we're doing right now is we're specifically looking at Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3, where Jesus writes 7 letters through the Apostle John. John's kind of the ghostwriter in this, where Jesus is writing these 7 letters to 7 specific churches of the Church of Asia. And today is week 6. And so next week is the final one. We're going to look at the Church of Laodicea. The weekend after that is Palm Sunday, and then we go into Easter Sunday together. Now, last week, man, he's not here so I can brag on him, but my buddy Grunt last week, he brought it. And I'm sitting in the front row and listening to Grant. Maybe it's the accent. Maybe it's just better because he's got the cool South African Durban accent. But last week he spoke, if you remember, and if you weren't here, let me just quickly bring you up to speed. Last week he spoke about the letter to the church in Sardis. And Sardis was known for being the largest of all 7 churches. So they were the mega church. So on the outside looking in, they looked very, very successful. Lots of people, lots of space in the auditorium, that kind of thing. Remember how Grant kind of presented that? Those of us that have been part of a mega church, you know what it's about. And at the end of the day, Grant wasn't ripping on the mega church. There are some really healthy mega churches, but a lot of times mega churches, really large churches, they grow because they're doing things on the exterior really well. But when you do a deep dive on what's going on inside, that's where things get a little messy. So you can walk in and they have the really cool coffee shop and the bookstore, and everybody looks nice. The pastor's wearing better clothes than this, for sure. And they've got the mega screen and they've got everything going on, and you walk in, you're like, wow, that's really cool. And so they bring people in. The pastor's got the 20-minute message because we don't want to go too long. We don't want to go too deep. Going to tickle your ears, make you want to be there. And all of this stuff is going on. And so we look at that and we're like, that's the church we want to be. We want to grow to be that church. Now it's interesting because last week Grant speaks about the church in Sardis, the largest of the 7 churches. Now we flip the page and we go to Philly. We go to the church in Philadelphia. Do you know what the church of Philadelphia is known for? Being the smallest of the 7 churches. So we go from the largest mega church down to the smallest. And it's really fascinating to me that in the letter to the church in Sardis, Jesus gives one of his biggest reprimands. Like next week when he talks to Laodicea, trust me, you don't want to be Laodicea. But next to Laodicea, I don't know if it gets much darker than when he's speaking to Sardis. He's like, listen, on the exterior, you guys look great, man. You got the building, you've got the people, you've got the coffee, your band looks amazing, they all look good in tight t-shirts and they rock out and they do all of this stuff. Well done there, right? But when I look at who you are, you're dead. I'm like, man, if Jesus wrote that letter to us and I opened it up and Jesus is like, hey man, you're doing everything on the exterior really, really well, but it doesn't matter. On the inside, this is a dead church. I'd be crushed. So he writes that to the largest church where culture's looking and going, man, that church must be successful. They've got the people, they've got the resources, they've got all of this stuff going on. And Jesus looks at it and says, you're dead. Then he goes to Philadelphia, this small church, probably not even wealthy enough to meet in the upstairs of an insurance building. They're borrowing the tabernacle, right? They're just going from place to place. Maybe they do set up and tear down. They don't have very many people, not a lot of resources. And what I want you to notice in this letter to the church in Philadelphia is that there's no correction point. You know how we've been talking about the correction sandwich? Every single letter has this correction sandwich where Jesus comes with an affirmation, a correction, and then finally a promise. So the correction for the churches is swallowed by an affirmation and a promise, letting them know, listen, I love you. I need to correct you. So here's an affirmation and a promise. But there's 2 churches of the 7 that don't get a correction point. The first one was Smyrna, which New Smyrna Beach is named after that city, okay? So the first one is Smyrna. The second one is this tiny little church of Philadelphia. Jesus doesn't have any correction points for this small little church. Lots of correction points for the big church. And by the way, that doesn't mean that all big churches are evil and all small churches are really good. Just talking about in this context, this small little church in Philly, Jesus doesn't have anything bad to say about it. Now, let me open up with you for a minute. I want to be real. I was trying to figure out how much of this to share. But I don't know, in your business world, in school, in your careers, whatever it is, what are the things that your ego struggles with? Like, you don't really want to talk about them, but at the end of the day, your egos, it's like, is it how much you make? Is it how you do in your company? For pastors, do you know what it is? It's numbers. It's always been numbers. It always will be numbers. We will always struggle with this, and it's always a pride thing. It's nickels and noses, right? How much money does a church have? How many people does a church have? If I meet somebody new and they find out I'm a pastor, okay, we talked about this, our staff talked about this the other day. When people find out we're pastors, so if we go get our hair cut, Grant got his hair cut last week while he was here, and while he was here, we went to Floyd's barbershop in Winter Park, and Grant will talk to a wall. Like, the dude can talk, okay? And people will listen to him because of that accent. So he's talking to his barber and just cutting it up, and all of a sudden they say, what do you do? What are you here in Orlando for? He's like, well, I'm a pastor preaching at a church. Silent, dead silence, right? Just, we have nothing else to talk about. Some people will open up, some people just shut off completely. So there's all of this stuff going on, but one of the things that's interesting in our line of ministry is that nickels and noses tend to be what people and strangers ask if they do want to talk about the church. Okay, you're a pastor? How big's your church? Where do you meet? Like, how? And pastors were like, oh, well, we meet in the upstairs of an insurance building, and it's pretty cool. And we have, 700-800 people that come. You know, we want to exaggerate. We want people to believe that we're real. We're like, we're not a cult. Like, we don't meet in the upstairs as a cult. We're legit. And so numbers are always a pride issue for us. And it's fascinating to me because everybody on our staff, every single person on our staff, the churches we came from prior to Orlando North, before I planted Orlando North, all of us came from mega churches. Every single one of us came from very, very large churches. We served on staff at a large church, and now here we are. And it's interesting because when we planted this thing, those of you guys that know me, you know this, so this isn't some kind of apocalypse revelation for you. But when you're young, you go into this thing, you're like, okay, what's this church going to look like 15, 16 years from now? And you're like, well, we're going to have 5, 6 campuses. Right? We're going to be busting at the seams. We're going to have 5,000 people at each one of those campuses. It's just going to be, we're going to take over Central Florida. This is who we are going to be. Now, understand my heart. Yeah, there was ego. There's no doubt about it. There was ego involved with that. But also, it's like every single number represents a person. There's no getting away from that every single number represents a person. But in it, I'm going, okay, we can do this. And then when I would fill in speaking at a church that I had a friendship with, I would speak and we would do 5 services. It was a church with 5 services. I don't even want to name the church. You know who I'm talking about, but they were the fastest growing church, not only in Florida, but in the entire country at the time. 5 services with about 800 people at each one. I'm like, this is Orlando North's future. There's no doubt of it. Everything was about the numbers. And the older you get and spiritually more mature you get, you're like, wait a minute, that's a trap. That's bait. I'm not taking that bait. For one thing, there's problems in a small church that I have to deal with, headaches that I have to deal with. Can you imagine the headaches I'd have to deal with if we were running 5,000? No thanks, I'm cool. I'm cool with that. Now, I do want us to grow because I want people to come to Christ. I want us to see lots and lots of people coming to Christ. But I remember just as I got older, it's probably around mid-40s, and I'm in the upper 40 region now, about the mid-40s, I started running across a couple parables that really humbled me. A couple parables that Jesus taught his disciples. The first parable, and you guys know these parables if you've spent any time in the Word. The first parable is the parable of the talents, where there's this master and he goes away. I'm just going to abbreviate this. The master goes away, and when he goes away, he entrusts his servants with his stewardship of his money, of his resources. So he gives 3 different servants, he gives them 3 different amounts or denominations of money. To one servant, he gives 1 talent. To another, he gives 3, and to another, he gets 5. I've always thought, growing up, I read this parable as the goal of this parable is to become the 5-talent person. So if you start with 1 and you're faithful, God will entrust you with 2. If you're 2, it'll be 3, 4. Ultimately, you'll be the 5-talent person. You'll be the large church, right? You'll have all of it. So I always thought that was the goal. But as you read this parable, that's not what this parable is about at all. You see, the guys who were entrusted with 3 talents and the guy that was entrusted with 5 talents, what they do is they go out and they invest the money. They double the money. So the one with 3 returns with 6. The one with 5 returns with 10. The master returns home and has these guys give an account for what they've done with the money. The guy with 6 talents and the guy with 10 comes up to the master and says, listen, this is what we've done with your money. We invested it. You gave me 3, here's 6. You gave me 5, here's 10. And the master says, well done, good and faithful servant, right? So enter into the joy of your master. But the guy with 1 talent, the small church guy, right? The one with only 1 talent over here, He goes, I knew you to be a hard master. I knew you'd be tough. I was scared of you. I didn't want to lose your money. So I didn't want to risk it. I didn't want to put it even in a security bond. So I buried that thing so that when you came home or when you came back, I could return your talent to you. So he gives him back the one talent, and Jesus, or the master, calls him a wicked, lazy servant because he did nothing with it. And I always read it. It's like, I got to become a 3-talent person. I'm starting off as a youth pastor. My next step is student ministries pastor. Then I'm going to become a church planter. Then I'm going to become a mega church guy. And then I'm going to speak at conferences and write books. You see that, right? Not necessarily in me, but you see that in the church world. Let's become the 5-talent guy. But this parable, this entire story is not about becoming the 3-talent person or the 5-talent person. Nowhere in the story does it say the 5-talent person was once upon a time a 1-talent person, or the 3-talent person was once a 2-talent person. The entire point of the story is faithfulness with what you've been given, period. Do you obey, and are you faithful with what you have been given? The 1-talent person was not reprimanded because he didn't have anything. He was reprimanded because he was disobedient with what he was given. The 5-talent person wasn't blessed and celebrated because he was wealthy and rich and did all this great stuff. It was because he was obedient. That's it. This is what we see in 1 Corinthians when we talk about the body of Christ. Some are elbows, some are noses, some are hands, some are feet. We're all the body of Christ. We all have a role to play. Are we obedient and faithful in that particular role? So that parable really spoke to me. Okay, it's like if we're going to be, and by the way, we are not a small, it's crazy to think, we're not a small church. We're in American statistics, we're pretty mid to up, okay? Now, I know mid means something totally different to teenagers today, but middle, we're middle of the pack. We're a decent-sized church for what we have, but the thing is, we're not trying to become a mega church. Now, whatever God has for us, whatever people he has coming in for us, cool. Bring them in, we will serve them. But the thing is, we're going to be obedient whether we're a 3-talent church or a 5-talent church. It's all about faithfulness. This is what that parable speaks. Then the other parable, and this is the one that blasted me, the parable of the 2 guys that build their house on different foundations. If you grew up in Sunday school, if you grew up in church, join me, will you? You with me? The wise man built his house upon the rock. Patsy's even got the hand signals going on. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came tumbling down. With me? The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down, and this is why I'm not a worship leader. Floods came up. Rains came down and the floods came up, and the house on the rock stood firm. Now, the other side of it, which for kids was way more fun than the house that stood firm. Now, the foolish man built, and I'm not going to sing this, the foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man, see, I'm just going to rhyme it, built his house upon the sand, and the rains came tumbling down. No, the rains came down, the floods came up. Rains came down, floods came up. Rains came down, and the floods came up, and the house on the sand went splat. That's the funnest part for all kids. Like, that's the cool part. But the thing is, hopefully this isn't lost when we're teaching our children. You don't want to be that guy, right? If you're going to build your house on something, make sure it's not sand. If anybody in the world should get that, it's Floridians. Do not build your house on a sinkhole. It's a really bad idea. So this parable has spoken so much to me, and here's why. I, again, worked at a mega church, saw the good, the bad, the ugly, the wonderful of the mega church world, saw it all. All of us, whether it's in Christian magazines, whether it makes CNN news, how many of us have seen the mega church that was built on sand? They had the stage, they had the band, they had the preacher, they had the style, they had the programs, they had the ministries, they had the coffee, they had the building, they had it all. But what they didn't have was they weren't built on the Word of God through the Spirit of God through Jesus Christ. Everything was show. And I think that's really the detriment of the last 20, 30 years of the church world. There's a lot of church growth. And listen, I can't tell you how many emails I get every week telling me how to grow the church. Church growth models, this is how you do it. And everything is exterior. Nobody says, this is how you know how you grow the church? Preach the gospel. Nobody says that. Like, this is what you do. You got to have the stage. You got to have the thing. You've got to have the technique. This is how you've got to speak. This is what you've got to wear. This is what you've got to do. These are the programs you have to have. And I'm sitting there going, these are houses that are built on sand. I don't want that for Orlando North. I will not compromise that for Orlando North. We want to be a Philadelphia, not a Sardis. And as Grant, it was crazy, as Grant was preaching last week, it's the only one that I haven't preached. So I've done the homework. I knew what Sardis was. But when he started talking, I'm like, we could have been Sardis. We could have been. From the very beginning, we could have sold out. Man, I knew some worship leaders I could have brought in. I knew some things we could have done. I know some things we could have thrown some money at. We could have built this thing on shallow stuff. And I promise you, within 3 years, we'd be gone. But here we are 15 years later. We might not be the biggest church in the world, but we've been grounded on the Word of God. Our church growth model is through Him and Him alone, because we're built, I believe, and this isn't a brag. I just believe this with all of my heart. We are built on solid ground. And it's really important. It's really, really important. So numbers matter in that they represent people, and these parables have deeply spoken to my life. So today we want to talk about the church in Philadelphia, this small church. Of the 7, the smallest church. So think about this. In Turkey and on this continent, they're looking at all these churches. They're looking at Laodicea, and they're looking at Ephesus and Thyatira and Sardis and Pergamum. They're looking at all these churches and going, man, look at these great churches. When they look at these churches, what do they say when they see Philly? Like, what's going wrong? What's up with Philly? Why are they so small? What are they not doing right that they are so small? They don't have the resources. They don't have the tools. So if I'm picking a church, if I'm traveling the continent, and I want a place to go for my kids, by the way, my kids grew up all right, and they grew up in a small church. And so you can do things in a small church that you cannot do in a large church. And so you're looking around and you're seeing all of this stuff, and you're going, okay, what church do I want to go to? I don't want to go to Philly because apparently something's wrong with them. They're not big. And so from an exterior standpoint, you're looking at it and you're judging a church by its cover. You're literally saying, okay, the amount of people equals how important they are. Listen, Christians do this all the time. You know who, and I don't want this. I'm not bitter about this. I'm totally cool with this. But you know who speaks at the big Christian conferences? Megachurch pastors. I haven't got one call in 15 years. Amazing. Amazing. Maybe I just suck. I don't know. But that's cool. I don't want it. But that's who gets invited to these things. So from the outside looking in, that's what success looks like. But Jesus comes and says to the megachurch, you're dead. To the small church, I have nothing to correct with you. I want to affirm something in you. I want to give you a promise. You're doing something right. I cannot imagine what that did for that church. Receiving a letter from Jesus going, you know, when the rest of the world sees us as failures because we're small, God sees a unique opportunity that He can do in us that He can't do in Sardis or in Ephesus or in Pergamum. There's something unique. And so when I started opening and studying, listen, Philly, like I don't root for your sports teams. I never will, ever. I will not root for the Philadelphia Eagles or the Phillies or actually anything in Pennsylvania. I won't. I love people from Pennsylvania, the Griffiths, the Weirs, love you guys. But man, you're horrible sports fans. Terrible. Penn State, all of it. Just hate it. But I'm reading this, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, as I'm reading about the church in Philly, I'm like, there's not a church of the 7 that's more Orlando North than this church. If we could pick what church we want to be, I want us to be Philly. This is who I want us to be. So what's going on in the city of Philadelphia? Every time we open up one of these letters, we look at the context of the city. A couple of things just real important that you need to know. Not anything really deep. It's just kind of important. In the city of Philadelphia, it was founded, the original Philadelphia was founded in 140 BC by 2 brothers, Arminius II and his brother Attalus. So Arminius and Attalus founded this city. Now Attalus he didn't go by Attalus. He went by the name Philadelphia. Weird name for a kid, but probably a little bit better than Attalus. So he's going by this name, Philadelphia. And here's what's going on. One day, Philadelphia, this guy, gets word that his brother, Arminius, who is in charge of the city of Philadelphia, has been assassinated. So he gets word that his brother has been killed and murdered. So he takes over ruling the city of Philadelphia, ruling the city that you're named after. I get that. That's kind of the way it's supposed to go. Later on, he finds out that this assassination rumor wasn't true. His brother wasn't killed. So, for those of you sinners in here who watch Game of Thrones, okay, you know when brothers are against each other back in the day, right? It wasn't just like, oh, you can have your throne back, right? You're going to fight it out. Brothers are going to go to war with each other, but that didn't happen with these 2 brothers. Instead, Attalus gave up his throne over the city, I call it a throne, gave up his rule over the city of Philadelphia, gave it back to his brother. Thus, Philadelphia, the original one, became known as the city of brotherly love. Okay, so that's where that comes from. Because when I go to Philly, PA, I don't see it. But Philly, Turkey, I get it, okay? So that's what's going on here. That's where they get their name. One of the things, it's interesting because every city, it feels like we're a broken record. Every city has trade routes going through it, okay? So every city has all roads leading to Rome. They're very important cities. They wouldn't be cities if they didn't have trade routes going to them. But Philadelphia was unique because it was a hub. It was a hub where you would go and visit before you branched out to the other cities. So it's like Atlanta for Delta Airlines or American Airlines going through Dallas. This is what Philly was at this time. So everybody knew Philly. So you're a small church in a city that everybody was aware of. And don't forget, this is true of almost every one of the churches we're talking about, that the cities were prone to earthquakes and volcano activities. So specifically Philadelphia, they were on the base of a volcano. And so occasionally this volcano would erupt. It would bring tension and anxiety and restlessness. They'd have to leave town. However, when there was no volcanic activity or earthquakes, think Turkey, modern day Turkey, 40,000 people just lost their lives to earthquakes. So this is their very real environment. So during peacetime, what would happen is they'd have fertile soil because of all this activity. And they would raise grapes and be able to sell wine. It was incredibly prosperous during peaceful times. But when that volcano went off, or when the earthquake happened, it would level the city, everybody would run, and then they would later come back when it was stable. So there was incredible instability in this city. So Jesus comes along and he sees this small church in this city, and he gives it an affirmation and a promise. When Lauren was reading this a minute ago, I don't know if you caught this, but it's really hard to tell where the lines are crossed between affirmation and promise because there's so much of it in here. It's like there's no space for correction. So for Ephesus, he's like, hey guys, you've lost your first love, man. Like you've lost your affection, you've lost your passion, you're just kind of going through the motions. You're a broken marriage, it's a wreck, it's a mess, right? So in Smyrna didn't have a correction point, so they were good. Then you get over to Pergamum and you're like, you're too much like culture. To Thyatira, you have the spirit of Jezebel. You're trying to worship God and worship other gods at the same time. You can't do that. To Sardis, you dead. Really bad news for you. You're dead. Laodicea, next week, really bad news. You're lukewarm. You're not hot or cold. You're lukewarm. But Philly, let me tell you what you're doing right. So let's walk through this. Let's walk through affirmation. I apologize because affirmation and promise are going to bleed together because it's really a lot of the same thing. But let's walk through this together, see what it has to do with us at Orlando North. You as a member, a person, a Christian at our church, what does it mean for us, for a church like ours? Revelation chapter 3, verse 7 says this, to the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write this, the words of the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one will open. Now, as I've said, and in case it's not clear, Philadelphia in the USA is a unique cat. Anybody been to Philly? Like, can you agree with me? Like, they got really great sandwiches. There's some stuff going on. They're unique. They're different from all other cities. Well, this happens here too. Every other letter, every 6 of the other letters, the opening remarks are, hey, to the angel of the church of Laodicea, to the angel of the church of Ephesus, write these things. And then Jesus identifies himself. He says, this is something you need to know about me, but all of these identifying markers come from chapter 1. In chapter 1, remember, we get the physical representation of Jesus. I'm the one who holds all the stars in my right hand. I have the bronze feet, the white hair, the purifying eyes. This is me. Then every letter after that, he would reflect on that, or he would draw out one of those names for the letters. Philly gets their own thing because they're Philly. They're special. So all the Philly guys, they get something that's not from chapter 1. Jesus comes and says, this is who I am. I'm the Holy One, the true one. Now, the first century Jewish person would have been like, whoa, that's a name reserved for one person, and that's Jehovah. There's only one person that goes by this label, the Holy One, the true one. And by the way, the article matters here. Grammar nerds, you're with me, right? The article matters here. An indefinite article is the word an. So an indefinite article would be, I am a holy one. I am a true one. He's like, no. I share my glory with no one. This is a definite article. I am the Holy One. I am the true one. I am the only God. And then out of that, he says something weird. And if you spend any time, where's Jay? Jay, I know you're here. Where's Jay Baker? There's my brother. You spend any time talking to this dude about the book of Revelation, this will come up. I went to lunch with him. We're talking about Revelation. I don't know how many times he said this phrase. He is the one who holds the key of David. Over and over. And this is before I prepared this message. I'm like, what does that even mean? He holds the key of David. This is what Jesus says about himself. I am the one who holds the key of David. This is awesome stuff. The key of David is really interesting. Again, the Jewish person would have noticed this. If you go all the way back to Isaiah chapter 22, this is where the key of David is introduced, as Hezekiah is the king of Israel at this point. Now, those of you guys that don't know Jewish history or even ancient king kind of stuff, realize this, that every ruler had a sidekick. They had like this steward that took care of their office. They had almost just as much authority as the person in power. Yeah, anybody watch The West Wing? Back in the day, West Wing, you had President Bartlett, but the vice president really carried no authority whatsoever. But it was Leo, the chief of staff, who did everything. I'm like, does the president even work, right? I have Duran. He makes me look really good, right? You go all the way back to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh had Joseph. All of these different examples. Well, in Isaiah chapter 22, King Hezekiah had his steward, his right-hand man, and this was, I want to make sure I get this right because I'm going to butcher it. It's Eliakim was his chief steward. He had complete control over everything in the royal household. Specifically, Eliakim had the undisputed authority to admit or exclude anyone from the ancient city of Jerusalem. He had the authority of the king, of King Hezekiah. Anything that he says goes. If he shuts the door to somebody, you can't come in. If he opens the door to somebody, he can come in. He was holding the key of David. This is what he is doing. So Jesus comes and he's like, I am the one, I am the truth, I am the Holy One, I'm not sharing my glory with another. I hold the key of David. So Jesus is letting this tiny little church, this insignificant to the world church, know something. I alone, the holy and true one, I hold the key of David. Everything in my Father's kingdom is under my control. What doors I open, nobody shuts. What doors I shut, nobody opens. And these doors are two things. It's the door of salvation. I open the door for people to come to the Father. But I also open the door of opportunity. Now think about this. You're a tiny church. You might be looking at Sardis going, man, they have really cool stuff. Look at their programs. Look at their reach. Look at their ministry. Look at the stuff they're doing. And Jesus comes and goes, you know one thing they don't have? Right now, they're lacking me. Hey, church, Philly. I know you don't have many resources, not a ton of people. You might not have the lights, the glitz, the glamour, but you know what you do have? The one who opens every door that is shut. The one who shuts every door that is open. You have me. I'm pretty cool with that. If we don't have the lights, and believe me, I want some of the stuff, I get it, but I want to reach people. But at the end of the day, if we don't have Jesus, it doesn't matter. So this is what he's coming to with these guys. This is how he begins this affirmation. Then he says this in verse 8. I know your works. He says this to every church. I know what's up. I know what you're doing well. I know what you're doing poorly. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one can shut. Orlando North, that's the season we're in right now. We believe this is the word God has given Orlando North. There is now an open door that we've never had open before. What is God going to do with it? He says this, I know that you have but little power. This is the sign that they're a small church. And yet you have kept my word and you have not denied my name. Jesus is coming to them going, listen, you as this small church in this city of influence where everybody comes, it's a hub of all of this activity, you've got a unique opportunity that other churches don't have. The biggest error Orlando North can do is trying to be a church that we're not. We look at Northland and said, hey, let's be Northland. Let's look at Summit, let's be Summit. Let's look at Calvary. When we first started, that's where many of us came from. Let's be Calvary. That's not who we are. What has God called us to uniquely as our own? We have the power of the one who holds the key of David. Why do they have the one who has the power of the key of David? Because they obeyed the word. This is the part that blows me away. And I know this is so boring, but this is so on point. This is what I keep preaching to our staff every Tuesday. They're probably getting sick of it. Guys, I want to be creative. I want to do creative things. I want to do some things ministry-wise. But at the foundation of it all, what Orlando North will forever be known as is people of the word. Doctrine matters. We need to know the Bible. We need to read the Bible. We need to understand the Bible. The Bible needs to drive everything, even if we don't think it's cool. We need to do this. This is what we need to be known for. And Philly is rewarded, not because they have great smoke. You have no idea how much the smoke machine has caused me headaches over 50, not like tangible headaches, but people are like, I love it, I hate it. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's smoke. Can we talk about the gospel, right? And so we want to be the church that's founded on the word. And I get it. I get why we would have problems with all the other stuff. But can we be known for the gospel? This is who we are. And so this is what's going on in this church right now. And so he continues. Jesus has rewarded them because they're obedient to doctrine, because they're obedient to the word, not because they're doing cool stuff. Verse 9, behold, I will make this part's just uncomfortable because every letter has something like this, and I hate this part of the letter. I'm allowed to hate a part of it. Like, I love the word of God. It's true. Doesn't mean I enjoy certain parts of it, okay? This is what it says. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan. Without looking further, don't even answer it out loud. Ask yourself, who are the members of the synagogue of Satan? You're like, Wicca? Witches? It's the Jews. Oh my God. And I'm like, oh. Anybody could take this sermon, it's online, take it out of context and be like, look at the anti-Semite at Orlando North. No. I'm reading the scripture, okay? That's all I'm doing. I'm just going to interpret it. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, they lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before the Gentiles' feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. What do we do with texts like this? Whoo! I wish Grant was preaching this right now. Like, hey, buddy, you're a guest. You can come do this. Here's what's going on, and we've touched on this a little bit. A couple times he's referred to the synagogue of Satan or Satan's throne. You sit on Satan's throne. He's referring to Jewish people who did not recognize Jesus as Lord. He's saying, listen, here's what's up with the Jewish people, and this should break our heart. It should break our heart the way it broke Jesus' heart. That the Jewish people have the entire story. They have the whole book. And it's like they've read the first 8 out of 10 chapters, and like, these first 8 chapters are incredible. But once we get to chapter 9, the chapter that fulfills the first 8 chapters, we're going to shut the door to those last 2 chapters. We're going to ignore the part about Jesus fulfilling and being the fulfillment of all the law. So what Jesus comes, and he comes and says this in Revelation, he's like, any Jewish person, and for the longest time, Jewish people have recognized themselves as Jewish by bloodline. He's like, it's not about bloodline. A true Jewish person is a child of Abraham. A child of Abraham. Abraham didn't create the Jewish nation because of his bloodline. He created the Jewish nation, or the nation of Israel, because he was a man of faith. It was credited to him as righteousness. And so this land, this people of Judaism, came from faith, not from works. So to follow Jesus is to become an actual child of God. In other words, to become an actual Jew. So the Jewish person is one who submits and surrenders to Jesus and obeys the full law, which is fulfilled in Jesus. If you don't follow Jesus, then there's problems. So we look back in Isaiah chapter, is it Isaiah 45? I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, in Isaiah 45, there's a promise made to the Jews. In Isaiah 45, it says that the Gentiles one day will bow at your feet, to which the Jewish people are like, let's go. And now all of a sudden we get to Revelation and it's switched. There's coming a day when the Gentiles will have you bow at their feet because they're following Jesus. They followed the whole word, and you only went up to chapter 8. And this is why for all of us, this is why when in our evangelism, if we have Jewish people in our lives, they have to be the ones that we are trying to convince the most. They're the ones that we have to present the gospel with, saying, hey, take your own scriptures and look. Read the final 2 chapters, man. These are really, really important chapters in the story. So this is what's going on here. So Jesus is saying all of this. And then finally, verse 10. Let's get to the meat. All of you, if you're bored with today, you're about to wake up. Everybody that's been waiting for me to talk about like tribulation and rapture and all that, I got you. You ready? You ready? I've been avoiding it at all costs, but here we go. And I'm only going to give you a teaser. We're going to do more later, but here we go. Verse 10 says this, because you have kept my word. So small church, Philadelphia, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, here it is, I will keep you from the hour of trial. So underline that, circle that. This is the thing that makes all of Revelation come together. This is the stuff that weird theories are based on. All of it is based on this. It's opened up with this one little sentence. I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell on this earth. So again, affirmation, promise, no correction. He just comes to them and he says, hey, Philadelphia, way to go, way to obey the word, way to be enduring all of this stuff. Here's my promise to you. Here's my affirmation to you. I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial. Awesome. At which point, me growing up in a Pentecostal church, we would start clapping. We'd be like, woo, amen. We'd have no idea what it meant. We just want to clap. We're like, cool, that sounds awesome. I will keep you from the hour of trial. And I'm a teenager in my seat going, I have no clue why we're clapping. One, you're going to keep me from the hour of trial. What are you talking about? So let's unpack this a little bit. And then when we get to Revelation chapter 7, we're going to unpack it some more. And you're going to see me sweat a little bit. And we're going to talk about some things. Now, again, as we walk through Revelation, there are certain doctrines that we are going to explore where there are theologians all across the board who will disagree with one another. And so my job is going to be to present to you these different theories, and you can decide for yourself which one you believe to be true. Now, there are going to be times where I'm going to be like, this is the way I lean. That doesn't mean you have to lean that way. These are certain doctrines that don't change your salvation. They don't change your relationship with God. They might change your worldview, but I want you to understand there are people in this room. Jay and I don't agree on everything. And that's the beauty of it. We can have conversations, healthy conversations. Imagine if politicians could do this, right? And so we can have these conversations and talk about it. So today I want to present to you what's going on with this. I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial. It all goes back to this idea of the word tribulation. Okay, we see this in the book of Revelation, this word tribulation. So tribulation simply means it's a specific time where God's justice and wrath is going to be poured out on earth through terrible happenings. Okay? Nobody disagrees with this. This is going to happen, or this is happening. That's the battle. Is it in the future, or is it already happening, or has it happened in the past? Right? Where is this tribulation? Where God's justice and God's wrath is going to come on this earth. Now, the theory is, the idea is, there's this extra biblical word named rapture. If you look through the New Testament, if you look in the book of Revelation, you're never going to find the actual word rapture. But over and over again throughout the New Testament, you're going to see the rapture alluded to. It's just not given this specific name, okay? So we've got Perusia, we've got a bunch of things that we'll look at later, but the word rapture is nowhere to be found. However, you watch Thief in the Night and you would swear it's the only word in the entire book of Revelation, okay? So Thief in the Night, Left Behind, everything is based around the tribulation and the rapture. Now, the rapture is this understanding that one day Jesus is going to return. We talk about this at Christmas every year, right? So Advent is an expected arrival. There's coming a day when Jesus will return, and he'll take to himself his church. Those of us that belong to Jesus, we've given our life by faith to Jesus. He's going to come, he's going to return. He's going to take us to heaven with him. Now, where this gets lost, where everything gets complicated is, when does the rapture happen? Everybody wants to know. Okay, so people start throwing out words that you have to, like if you're in church, you have to pretend like you know these words because you don't want to come across as stupid. Well, I'm going to save you. I'm going to rescue you. If you don't know what these words mean, today you'll walk out going, now I'm a nerd. Now I've got it all together, right? We're going to talk about words like pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib. Anybody heard these words? Like what's going on here, okay? What this is referring to is the order of events. When does the rapture happen? And when does the tribulation happen? When does God's wrath take place on earth? And at what point does God's rapture happen? Does God's rapture come before the tribulation, where God rescues his people and then they don't have to experience the tribulation? That's pre-trib. Pre-tribulation, the rapture happens before the tribulation. Does it happen where the tribulation started at the resurrection of Jesus and it just continues to go until Jesus returns and the rapture happens somewhere in the middle of that? That's mid-trib. Or is it post-tribulation, where there's going to be a tribulation and all Christians that are alive are going to suffer and endure this tribulation, and then at the end of the tribulation, post-trib, Jesus returns and raptures his church from that? What is it? What is it? Well, I'd love to sit up here and say the Bible is very, very clear. But whatever pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, you can make a case for all three of them. And it's ridiculous how much it hurts my mind because I see all of them. For the pre-tribbers, pre-trib is this idea that Jesus' rapture is going to happen before the tribulation, so Christians will not have to endure the tribulation. When you read this, isn't this what it sounds like is going on? Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial. So on the surface, it looks like Jesus is saying, hey, Philadelphia, before the tribulation happens, I'm going to rapture you out, okay? So is this what's going on? This is the great debate in it. Post-trib, again, the rapture happens after the tribulation. What do we do with this? So pre-trib. Let's talk about pre-trib, post-trib, and then I'm going to conclude this thing and get this thing done. Are you guys with me? You okay? Okay, this is the stuff that makes me sweat, even though it's 40 degrees in here. Let's talk about this. Pre-trib, when Jesus talks to the church in Philly and he says, I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial, it could be pre-trib, where the rapture happens before the trial. Because it says, I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial. This word from is a preposition in the Greek that is the word ek. If you, listen, anybody can learn Greek today. You just learned it. Ek. Ek if I know. Thank you. That's such a Duran joke. It's so bad. So the word ek, it's a preposition. And this is the preposition used here for the word from. And it literally means separation from or out of. Separation from. So I'm going to separate you from the hour of trial. I'm going to bring you out of the hour of trial. It sure does sound pre-trib to me. You too? Like I'm going to bring you from it before the tribulation even happens. If Jesus wanted to make a different point and say, hey, I'm going to sustain you through the tribulation, he could have used a different preposition. He could have used the preposition en, okay, which literally means in, inside, or among, or the more common preposition dia, which means through. I'm going to keep you through the tribulation, but he doesn't. He uses the preposition ek. I'm going to keep you from it. So there's an incredibly strong argument to be made that the rapture would happen before the tribulation would occur, which for us is incredible news, right? Man, I don't want to go through the tribulation. Jesus, please rescue us from it before it happens. Okay, so that's the pre-trib. Post-trib, even mid-trib, this is what they believe. They believe this word from should be interpreted a little bit differently. They believe instead of bringing us out of, it means I'm going to persevere you and sustain you through the tribulation. All Christians will walk through the tribulation if they are alive. Okay, of course, the saints that have already died, it's impossible. They're not coming back as zombies to live through the tribulation. This is, if you're alive during the tribulation, I'm going to sustain you through it. This is where the term amillennialism comes from. They believe that at the resurrection of Jesus, the tribulation began. And the tribulation will continue until Jesus' return. So all of us are currently living in the tribulation. There are certainly signs of our times that say it's pretty wicked out there. Right? I don't know if it's the full wrath of God. I don't know if it's the full judgment of God, but they would say that right now we are in the tribulation and God is going to rescue us from it at some point and come through. Now, the pre-tribbers have this text, I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial. What do the post-tribbers have? Well, they have the high priestly prayer. In John chapter 17, Jesus is praying for us. It's the greatest prayer in the entire Bible. Jesus prays for his disciples as he's about to go away and ascend into heaven for the rest of the time until he comes back for his second return. And he prays for them, but then he says, I also pray for those who come after them. I pray for the Augustines. I pray for the Calvins and the Luthers. I pray for the Zwinglies. I pray for and you know who else I pray for? Orlando North Church. He's praying for you. He's praying for us. In verse 15, this is his prayer. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. The promise and the prayer of Jesus is that in the middle of suffering, he doesn't always deliver us from it. That's why prosperity gospel is hogwash. I mean, it's evil. To me, it's the most evil thing there is. The prosperity gospel that if you follow Jesus, everything's going to be smooth and okay. No. If you follow Jesus, that road is bumpy. And that's a road of suffering. It's a road of the cross. And he says, but I will sustain you even through it. My question then, again, this is pre-trib and post-trib. My question is, why would Jesus tell this church in Philadelphia that he's going to hold them out of it if the tribulation was still 2,000 years away? Because if the tribulation still hasn't happened, why would he make any comment to Philadelphia about it at all? And why only Philly? Why not Ephesus? Why not Smyrna? Smyrna's a good church. Why didn't they get this warning? So a case could be made for either. And that's the point of today. I'm just introducing you to these terms, okay? So hang with me. We'll talk more about it later. But the debate is, does Jesus rapture us before the tribulation, or does he rapture us during the tribulation? Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You got to live the life that you've been given. So are we in the tribulation, or is the tribulation coming? All I know is the one who holds the key of David opens doors that are shut and shuts doors that are open, and he's our king. And that's what I take out of this. Now, it changes the worldview. Do I lean one of these two ways? Absolutely, I lean one of these two ways, and it changes my worldview. But it doesn't change who Jesus is. And it doesn't change how I believe in Jesus. So don't get caught up. Please study the stuff. Study pre-trib, post-trib, premillennial, postmillennial, amillennial. Study all of it. Please have your own conclusion. But at the end of the day, don't lose sight of the one who holds the key of David. Do not forget that. So he's saying this, he's giving all these promises. He's saying, the point is, listen, I'm gonna keep you. If you suffer in tribulation, I'm not leaving you. I'm the one who walks in the middle of his church. I'm the one who holds the 7 stars. I'm the one who has the key of David. Whether you walk through it or it's already happened or it's going to happen, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm with you. And then the final promise, Revelation chapter 3, verse 11 through 13, I am coming soon. Thank God. I am coming soon. When I was my kid's age, this sweet age of 18 to 21, this was the worst text in the Bible. No, things are about to get good. Don't come now, right? I'm about to start my career. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids. There's things I want to do. Don't come now. Ladies and gentlemen, the anthem of my prayer as a 48-year-old broken man. Do you know what happened to me this morning? I've got fake teeth on right now because I got a fake crown waiting for my permanent. I bit into a bagel and it snapped in half this morning. This morning, I've got orthodontic wax holding these teeth in place, praying that they don't fly on the front row. So, you know the prayer of my life as my rib is out and my teeth are falling out of my face? Do you know what my prayer is? Please come back. For the love of all that is good, come soon. But when I was 21, that was not my prayer. Anybody over than 48 and you're like, yeah, that's the anthem of my heart, right? Jesus, come soon. So the promise is I am coming soon. When I was a kid, we sang, I'm almost done. When I was a kid in Sunday school, we sang another song. We didn't just, the hand motions with Patsy, build my house upon the rock. We sang, Jesus is coming soon, morning or night or noon. Really good news, right? Many will meet their doom. Trumpet will sound. I'm like, who teaches kids that? And they taught us to cheer. I will never forget, they taught us to cheer that. Many will meet their doom. That's not good news. It's terrible news. So I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of my city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, in my own name. So this is all yours, is what he's saying. All of this is yours. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. 3 promises, and these are quick. Promise number 1, Jesus is coming soon. Listen, soon, for those of us that grew up in the church, at some point we start questioning our preacher. Jesus coming soon? It's been 2,000 years, bro. What does soon mean? Like, you define soon for me because I'm thinking soon as in like Tuesday, not 2,000 years from now, right? Soon does not mean immediately. It means without delay in God's perfect timing. When the first Christians, under Paul's ministry specifically, when they started hearing that Jesus is coming soon, do you know what they did? They went into their bosses the next day and they quit their jobs. Genius. That's faith. Jesus is coming back tomorrow, so hey boss, see ya, right? And so they started spending everything. They had parties. They just started wasting everything. My question is, if you knew Jesus was coming back next Sunday, how would you live the next 7 days? Would you cash out? Would you quit? Can I tell you what I hope you would do? I hope it would elevate the urgency of the gospel for people who do not know him. You've got 7 days to tell everybody you know that there's one way to heaven. And it's not your righteousness, it's not your good works, it's Jesus. And so Jesus is coming soon, but we as Christians take that. We're like, it's been 2,000 years, we probably got time. I've told you before, there are 2 people in my life that I was trying to witness to and I became a coward and both of them died. One died of skin cancer, one got hit by a car on 434. There's nothing I can do about that now. He says, I'm coming soon. What are you going to do? The promise is, I am coming soon. The second promise he gives us is that he's going to make of you a stable pillar in the temple of God. Whenever we hear pillars, we got to think stability. All the way back to Samson in the Old Testament, right? The pillars that he tears down with the Philistines. Then we go over to 1 Timothy, and remember what Paul tells Timothy about the local church? He's not saying the big church, universal church. He's not talking about the Christian church. He's talking about, do you know what Orlando North is? You're a pillar of truth. You hold up truth in your city. This is your job. So he promises us that we who follow Jesus, the promise is keep his word, and we will be stable pillars for God in our city. This is amazing for people who live on a volcanic base and experience earthquakes, and everything in their life is unstable. The stability of their life doesn't come through their circumstances. It comes through their king, the one who holds the key of David. So Jesus is coming soon. The promise is that. The promise is also you'll be a stable pillar. And finally, the last promise is that God's name and location is on you. I'm going to borrow a closing illustration that I used years ago, but it's just that good. Okay, so if you've been with us for a while, act like you've never heard this. Temples back in the day were named after people, pagan and Jewish temples. The Jewish temple was Solomon's temple. You put a name on the temple. Zeus's temple, Artemis's temple, right? They all had their temple. They had their name written on their temple. And then Jesus comes along in the New Testament and says, what's the temple now? We are. Those of us that belong to Jesus, given our lives to Jesus, we are now the temple of the Holy Spirit. Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And Jesus comes in this section and says, and I write my name on you. This temple belongs to me. Toy Story fans, and I'm not trying to be funny. Matter of fact, I'm going to try to make it through this. I practiced it with the band. I'm going to try to make it through this because Toy Story ruins you. If you've never seen the movie Toy Story 1's fun. Toy Story 3 is like this, like there's The Notebook and there's Toy Story 3. The saddest movies of all time. Andy goes to college and gives up his toys. So all of this is happening. And so in Toy Story, if you haven't seen it, if you're the one who hasn't seen it, Gary probably hasn't seen Toy Story. You haven't seen Toy Story, have you, man? Yeah, I'm actually proud of you for that. So he hasn't seen Toy Story. In Toy Story, we're introduced to two main characters, a bunch of toys that belong to Andy. Andy's a little boy, right? And the toys come to life when no human can see them. But when an adult or a person's in the room, the toys all go limp, right? They go back to just being toys. Well, Buzz Lightyear comes into the scene late. He's a birthday present for Andy, and he comes into the scene late, and he comes in like a roaring lion. I am Buzz Lightyear. I am here to take on Emperor Zurg. Where's Zurg? Let's go. And he believes he's really Buzz Lightyear, Space Ranger. He doesn't know that he's a toy. And all the other toys are kind of laughing at him. Buzz doesn't know he's a toy. Buzz has no clue. And Buzz is like, I am Buzz Lightyear, Space Ranger. I can fly. I can do real missiles. He doesn't realize it's just a light coming out of him. He thinks it's a real like laser and all. So this is Buzz. This is Buzz. And then one day, Woody's like, hey, you know you're a toy, right? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm not a toy. I am Buzz. And he still believes him a toy. He's a toy. But one day he's standing in front of the TV. He's been laid out in front of the TV. He sees a commercial for Buzz Lightyear, Space Ranger, going after Emperor Zurg. And all of a sudden it connects. Wait, I'm just a toy. This is who I am not everything I always thought I was. He's having an identity crisis. Like, this is major millennial stuff. This is what ruined the millennials right here. They're like, who am I? I don't know. Buzz says I'm this. So Buzz is struggling with who he is, and he finds out I'm just a toy. This is all I am. I'm just a toy. So the story continues, story goes on, a lot of things happen, and finally Woody, played by Tim Allen, okay, right? Tim Allen was Woody, or no, Tom Hanks was Woody. And so Woody gets kidnapped by the next door neighbor, Sid, who's an evil little bratty kid, okay? He's just a terrible kid, and he kidnaps Woody, and Woody needs some help. But Buzz can't help because Buzz is like, I don't know who I am. Poor me, I'm just a toy. I can't do it, right? Pity party. This is what Buzz is going through. And finally, Woody gets a hold of Buzz, and Woody gives an impassioned speech to Buzz. He says, yeah, Buzz, you're not a space ranger. You are a toy, and your owner, Andy, he loves you. And he has, you remember this moment? Killer moment in the story. Incredible story. He's like, do you know what all of us toys have? On each one of us, Andy has inscribed his name on each one of us. Like, yeah, you might not be a space ranger. You might not do what you think you can do, but look at your foot. You belong to the best owner in the world, man. You belong to Andy. Your purpose may not be to defeat Emperor Zurg. Your purpose is to love and support your, I don't want to say maker, your Andy, your guy, your owner. You belong to him. He loves you. He finds joy in you, and your purpose is to find joy in making him happy. And in this is what's going on through the book of Revelation. A transformation takes place in Buzz's mind. All of a sudden, he realizes that although he's not what he thought he was, although he feels insignificant to the world, we're a small church, we have no space, what do we do? Although he feels like he has little power, he realizes that he's loved by his owner. And that's all that matters. And Jesus comes with this promise. He's like, listen, I'm coming soon. You're going to be a pillar of truth. But what I need you to know is my name is written on you. Some of you guys in this room, identity is a huge issue. It's probably the number one issue that teenagers have to deal with. Who am I? Who am I apart from my parents? Who am I apart from my sexuality? Who am I in all of these different things? Who am I at school? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? You know who you are? You're a child of the King. And his name is stamped and imprinted on the soul of your temple. This is who you are. The same is true for you. You belong to Jesus. You are his. You bring him joy. He loves you. He wrote his name on you. You may feel insignificant, but Jesus says to you that you belong to him. And this isn't wishy-washy, sappy stuff. The King of the universe says, you're mine. You are mine. And somebody needs to hear that. So we can get lost in the pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, and I love that stuff. It also gives me a headache, but I love that stuff. But at the end of the day, I belong to the King. Not because I did things right or stopped being a bad boy, but because once upon a time I said to Jesus, I surrender. I'm done fighting you. I give you my heart. I will obey you. It doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect. God, my family knows how imperfect I am. You guys, I confess it to you guys, how imperfect I am, but my way into heaven, my way into a relationship with Jesus is not because I'm a good boy or a good girl, it's because his name is stamped on my heart. And the truth is, the same is available for you if you've never given your life to Jesus before either. Nobody else can do it for you. Mom and dad can't do it for you. Your pastor can't do it for you. At some point in your life, you have to make a decision. Do I surrender to Jesus or do I not? And my identity is either going to be in myself and my ways, to which Jesus will say, you are dead because you're building your house on sand. Or you're going to say, listen, I want to be a child of the King. I want to build my life on the rock, which is Jesus Christ. And all of us have that opportunity. So maybe you're here today and you've never given your life to Jesus. Listen, don't think for a minute that you being here is a mistake. This isn't coincidental or accidental. Jesus is drawing your heart, saying, I am the way to eternity. I am the way to heaven. I am the way to purpose. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I don't want to be that preacher that comes up and says it's not going to be easy. Following Jesus is not easy, but it's worth it. There's hope, there's future, there's eternity. Surrender, surrender, surrender. That's the call of God on your life today. Will you bow your heads? I'm going to invite you just in the privacy of your own chair this morning just to spend a moment reflecting on what we just said. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've never given your life to Jesus. Maybe your faith has been your parents' faith. And I'm thankful for your parents. I'm thankful they've pointed you in a certain direction, but at some point, the decision to follow Jesus is yours and yours alone. What do you do with that? Do you ignore him? Do you push him away? Or do you come to Jesus and say, Jesus, I don't have all the answers. I don't understand everything. This pre-trib, I don't get it. But if the God of the universe died for me, gave his life for me to forgive me of my sin, to cleanse me of my sin, I want in on that. So I want to surrender to you, Jesus. I want to surrender to your lordship. I want to surrender to your word. Whatever you say to do, I will do my best to follow you. Will you cleanse me? Will you forgive me? Will you make me new? Will you give me hope and a future in you? And for all of us this morning, Jesus, I just welcome your spirit into our lives. I pray that if we have forgotten who we are in you, if we look at others and we compare ourselves and we fall short of what they are or who they are, when we remember that success is not dictated by what's going on the outside, that something can look good and stable, but at the inside it's dead. I pray that our hearts would be just absolutely possessed by you. You'd remind us on a daily basis who you are, not who we are, but who you are. Love on us, draw us closer to you. Let the word come alive, let worship be real, and we give you all the praise, glory, and honor. It's in Jesus' name we pray.